Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Wednesday, May the 7th, 2025. On the surface, there isn't a great deal going on today. If you look at today astrologically, you look at the main aspects, it seems a little bit disappointing, a bit boring. But then, when you drill down and you actually look at what's really happening, you find that things aren't so simple. And there is a quintile between Mars and Uranus, 72 degrees between these two planets. And quintiles tend to get ignored by astrologers. But I do regard them as potentially important aspects. And more than that, today the Sun is aspecting the Mars-Uranus midpoint. So actually, there is a strong Mars-Uranus feel to what's going on today. And that might mean that today is actually more interesting and perhaps more dangerous than it appears to be on the surface. And in this video, at the end of this video, I will be looking at the Mars quintile Uranus aspect in detail. But first of all, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Wednesday, May the 7th, 2025. As always, if you happen to like this video, feel free to like it. If you're not subscribed, I would be very happy to have you as a subscriber. So anyway, let's look at what's happening today. So the moon is still in Virgo. And you can see moon is at 22 Virgo at noon, New York time. So moon is going to be in Virgo all day long. And the moon makes a couple of aspects. It makes a trine to the sun. So we started to have a moon trine sun yesterday on Tuesday. And now it's really there. And I regard the trine between the moon and the sun as being fortunate. Sun and the moon are both in earth signs and they have a harmonious relationship. And I'm a big fan of soft aspects between the sun and the moon. It may give us a feeling that things are working and that things are in balance. Though with the moon in Virgo, many of us are going to want things to be done right, and we're going to notice imperfections. I mean, there are imperfections everywhere, all around us, and we shouldn't take them to heart. But today we may notice some more than usual. Now, another thing about the moon is that it is starting to make an opposition to Saturn. Well, in fact, it's making two aspects. Moon is making a square to Jupiter, and it's making a square to Saturn. So, the moon Jupiter square is probably the more important of the two aspects, because that happens first. If even in the Americas, that moon opposition Saturn is quite late in the day. But we shouldn't forget that moon and Saturn are in opposite signs to one another. So there could be a moon-Saturn feel to today, at least by the end of the day. But, moon square Jupiter is a slightly different energy. It encourages us to think and to think again and to look at things in another way and in another way. And, well, it could tie us in knots, actually, because we might overanalyze things with moon square Jupiter, and there could be an exaggeration. And it's not our mind making exaggeration; it's our heart, and our feelings could respond to this and respond to that, and we may sort of lose our centering, and that's not something that we want. And then we've got moon opposition Saturn. Okay, it might not happen until late in the day, but I was asked in one of the comments, what orb do I use? The orb is the different. How far can an aspect be before it's no longer counted? Well, my answer to that is kind of it depends. And if you've got moon opposition Saturn, you could argue that your aspect, your orb should be as much as you like, basically. If they're in two separate signs, if they're in two opposite signs, there is still going to be a tension there with Moon opposition Saturn, and this Moon opposition Saturn is applying. So by the end of the day, we just may feel, again, particularly in the Americas. I don't think if you're in Australia or New Zealand, you have to worry about it too much. But by the end of the day, we may feel that something is getting us down. Something has to be taken seriously. And, we might not want to take it seriously. Or, we have a sense of order. We think we've sorted everything out. But then Saturn comes along and says, we haven't. But, don't obsess too much about this Moon opposition Saturn. It's not exactly an unusual aspect. It takes place once a month. And then we have what I would regard as being the headline aspect of the day. And that headline aspect is Mars quintile Uranus. And I think the quintiles are regarded as a Keplerian aspect. I believe it was Kepler that first started using quintiles, even though Kepler is not really he's not really at the moment associated with astrology. He's more seen as a scientist and an astronomer. I mean, that does happen when people look at these people like Galileo and Kepler. They say, oh no, they were astronomers. They try to block out the fact that they were interested in astrology. Galileo was really into astrology. I think it's said that he spent more time on astrology than on astronomy, though hundreds of years ago astrology and astronomy were the same thing. I think that you could at least argue that. And so this Mars quintile Uranus, we can talk about it being a man-made aspect because it is quintile, trying to bring two principles together, and it might sound like something that is quite mental in our mind. And we're trying to have an impact or trying to do something that has an impact. And Mars-Uranus can be a dramatic impact. And I think that this might manifest, not just because Mars is quintile Uranus. It's made more interesting by the fact that there's an involvement with the Sun. So let me just show you that involvement. Don't worry, I'll be going into more detail at the end of the video. But here is Mars and here's a Uranus-Mars quintile. They are 72 degrees apart, and so the approximate midpoint of Mars and Uranus is it's about 2 degrees Cancer, and that means that the Sun is making a 45-degree aspect to the Mars-Uranus midpoint. And that, to my mind, is significant. Okay, the Sun does often aspect the Mars-Uranus midpoint, but it's aspecting the Mars-Uranus midpoint at a time when Mars and Uranus are in aspect by this 72-degree aspect, by the 72-degree angle. So this might be about deliberate action to stir things up, to create waves, to make an impact. And potentially, I think this Mars-Uranus quintile could actually be quite dangerous, especially as the Sun is aspecting the Mars-Uranus midpoint. But I will be looking at it in greater detail at the end of the video, though this Mars quintile Uranus may colour some of my descriptions of the 12 signs. So that's a picture in New York. If we look at it from the perspective of Sydney, Australia, as a representative of Australasia and Eastern Asia. So the Moon is a bit earlier in Virgo. So that's quite a long way from the opposition of Saturn. So the main aspect, aside from Mars quintile Uranus, if you're in Australasia, that Moon trine Sun is really exact at around lunchtime. Or sort of late morning. So if you're in Australasia, you may really feel that Moon trine Sun. And as I say, the Moon trine Sun is a very fortunate aspect. Things are really in harmony with one another. So for many of you in Australia or New Zealand, regardless of whatever your sign is, it can be quite a fortunate and balanced day. Then there is the heliocentric view. And so here we have things from the sun's perspective, and we do see a fairly similar picture to what we had yesterday. And one aspect in particular that we should take note of is this Venus square Mars. So we had Venus square Mars yesterday, but the Venus square Mars, heliocentric Venus square Mars, it's now really close. It's exact today. And as I was saying yesterday, Venus and Mars together it's an aspect to do with attraction and repulsion and how we get on with people, whether people like us, whether people like the way we present ourselves. Relationships can matter in a good and a bad way. There are ways to assert ourselves and to get noticed, but we have to be careful, and we have to think very carefully about who we're trying to impress and what we have to do. And we do have to accept with Venus square Mars that some people don't find us appealing, and also we don't find them appealing. It's just the way it is. So that's the main aspect heliocentrically today. Also, we continue to have this Earth square Mercury. So Earth is Mercury is just moving away from a square to Mercury. So Earth square Mercury, it can be about the struggle to say something because it's a square. We want to say something about maybe the condition of this planet, where we live. It's our planet, and sometimes our ideas might not be fully in accordance with what's happening in the world around us, and that might bother us. So those are the main things going on heliocentrically. I probably missed something, but I just now want to move on to the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Wednesday, May the 7th, 2025. Aries, it could be a deceptive day. On the surface, it appears that everything has to run according to a particular plan. At least that's how you'd like it to be. That doesn't sound very Aries, but sometimes you just want some order and you want to know what's going to happen next, and you're maybe not especially in the mood for surprises, but things can just happen, and your attempts to create a structure to make sure that everything is in the right place may be thwarted. Things can just happen, and you've made assumptions that things are going to happen in a particular way, and those assumptions may not actually turn out to be true, or people might do things or say things that you hadn't really made an allowance for, and that could cause trouble. And the spoken word could have implications. And it may just be about saying too much. For example, you might see something that is wrong, and you feel you have to say something about it, and then you say something else about it, and then you get some feedback, and you don't approve of that feedback, and then it goes on and on. So that could be quite a disruptive influence. And the moon is making a conjunction to the south node. So Aries, don't feel that everything has to be perfect. And if you see that things are going a little bit wrong in one area, don't worry about it too much, and try not to complain too much. Of course, sometimes you have to complain, and sometimes you have to create waves. And so it may be a day that it feels like it's trying your patience, and then we've got this quintile aspect between Mars and Uranus, and I think this aspect could actually have a big impact on you. Now, a quintile can be an aspect that is a little bit contrived. We want to force the pace. We want to create something, and we consciously want to create something. And it could be the case, Aries, that you feel that you have no option but to consciously create an event or do something that forces the outside world to react. And it could be conscious or unconscious. Sometimes you, at an unconscious level, you do something that you weren't really planning on doing it, but you just do it anyway, and that can cause a real stir. It can force people to pay attention to you. So whether you're in control or not in control, whether it's conscious or unconscious, you can do something that definitely causes a reaction. So Aries, you have to consider, whether that's really what you want. Maybe it is, and it just could be the case that you just can't stand things the way they are, and something has to shift. And if you really feel that something has to shift, then I think you really can create change. And sometimes there is an obligation there, or maybe a moral obligation, if you feel that you are in a situation which is unacceptable. And it's not just your personal situation, you're up against something which you regard as being wrong and which has to be addressed, then now might be the time to speak your mind. And if you do speak your mind, and you're properly prepared, then Aries, I do think that you can have a really quite a big effect on the world around you. Taurus, you do think or you feel that things are just a little bit slow, but slow not necessarily in an especially pleasant way. Things just seem to be held back. You can see where change is required, but some people are just refusing to accept this need. They are just hanging on, and you're aware of a situation which is quite possibly moving from bad to worse, and it's something you can see. It's in front of you, and then there is a question of what actually can you do about it, and that might be something you're asking yourself. Are you in a position where you can create a change? Well, I think you probably are in a position where you can change things that you don't like, and you perhaps benefit from the fact that the sun is moving through your sign. Sun is moving through Taurus. Moon is making a trine to the sun in Taurus, and Moon in Virgo making a trine to the sun in Taurus. So that's a situation or an event that does give you real power, and you can at least stop the rot. Now, I need to sort of qualify that when I'm talking about the rot and something that needs to be stopped. It may not affect you directly, but it still concerns you. And if something concerns you, then it becomes part of your business. And so don't be too insular. You may actually have a moral obligation to make a fuss. And if you're not happy about something, then people really should know about it. And at the same time, it's not an unhappy day, because the moon is making a trine to the sun. Moon trine sun, it's a great aspect, and it's a particularly great aspect if you're a Taurus, because the sun is moving through your sign and the moon is moving through Virgo, and moon in Virgo is about you enjoying things, or you can enjoy things. You can indeed enjoy the good things in life, and you can do things your way. And it's nice to do things your way. I mean, you don't want to totally do things your way. You you will at times have to consider other people in the end. I mean, the moon makes a square to Jupiter. In the end, it makes an opposition to Saturn. Now, that opposition to Saturn is going to be in the background until the end of the day and into tomorrow. And with that moon opposition Saturn, it may occur to you that there is something limiting your freedom of action, and just something you have to take into account. And that's especially the case if your social life is important, if you're mixing with different people, if you have to give account of yourself to others. It could be anyone, could be friends, could be colleagues, could be associates. I don't think partners in a one-to-one sense, but groups of people and their attitudes to you could be a problem. They could sort of limit your freedom of action, or at least that's how you might perceive it. Take advantage today, every opportunity to, be free, and to be free thinking, and to do what you want to do. And in that way, you can establish yourself, and you can get an idea about, what it's all about, and what you can do in a constructive sense. But in the end, you just may find that you run into a block, and that block could have a social dimension. But you don't have to think too much about what's happening late in the day or tomorrow. You, if possible, try to take every moment as it comes, and not feel any great sense of obligation unless you really have to. Moon does make a square to Jupiter, and with the moon square Jupiter, that might have a financial dimension. I mean, you could see that moon square Jupiter with the moon opposition Saturn, because you've kind of got a T-square here, because you've got moon moving to an opposition of Saturn, then you've got Jupiter on a T. So with that aspect, your first impulse might be to maybe spend some money. It's something you want, something that might make you feel happy, moon square Jupiter. Or you might be encouraged to be generous, or you might feel it's a good idea to be generous, give something away. It seems a good idea at the time. And then moon opposition Saturn, you realize maybe that wasn't such a good thing to do. And you could be confronted, for example, with another person's lack of gratitude. Don't assume that if you do something for someone, especially in a financial sense, that they're going to be grateful. They may not be grateful. They may actually just take you for granted. So don't be excessive or over generous when it comes to money. Gemini, you still feel that you would be better off just exactly where you are, that there really is nothing that you need to do, and I don't think that you're especially in the mood for taking risks, and you might in general be happiest with what you're comfortable with. But I'm not sure if that is necessarily the right approach. You may feel superior in your own world, but your own world is your own world. It's not the real world. And so, Gemini, there may be a challenge here. You don't want to project yourself, but maybe you should be projecting yourself. Maybe you're missing out on something. When you make the effort, I think that you can be actually very sociable. People will appreciate your company, and it may well be that you've got something really quite important to offer. And we can actually see this in the chart, because your Mercury is in late Aries. So Mercury in Aries, that's about you. Mercury is your ruler. It's in Aries. It's socially active, or it can be socially active, even though right now I don't think you're in the mood for being socially active. And Mercury is on the Sun-Venus midpoint. It's conjunct the Sun-Venus midpoint. So if Mercury is on the Sun-Venus midpoint, that would indicate that from a social view, you're quite effective, and you can get on with people in actually quite a natural and spontaneous way. And so that's all potential, but for some reason you feel you can't be bothered. And so perhaps, Gemini, you should be bothered, because it's the right thing to do. And if you spend all day in your home or in your basement or wherever you feel most comfortable, you would be missing out on things, and you would be actually in the wrong place. So it's therefore important that you have a sense of responsibility, to your fellow human beings, and also to yourself and your ambitions. If you've got ambitions, then those ambitions need to be taken seriously, and you actually need to project yourself and do something about it, and maybe tell people about what you want, and you should find that that they listen. And don't forget, Jupiter's in Gemini. Jupiter is still in Gemini. Jupiter in Gemini is a time for you of expansion, where you should be making the most of everything. And Jupiter will not be in Gemini for much longer. In about a month's time, Jupiter moves into Cancer, and it won't come back into Gemini for another 11 years. So you need to take every opportunity to take advantage of that Jupiter in Gemini. And it would be a shame if your insular approach, undermined you and, prevented you from really using your many talents to the maximum. So Gemini, you need perhaps to try a little harder, and you mustn't just do things or not do things because you want to make yourself feel comfortable. It's nice to feel comfortable, but sometimes you can feel too comfortable. Cancer, the moon continues moving through Virgo, and as I've already suggested, moon moving through Virgo from a Cancerian view is quite pleasant. That there's not a great deal of pressure there, and if you want to do something, you can. If you don't want to do something, well, you don't have to. At least that might be your initial reaction. But the moon is making a square to Jupiter, and in the end it actually makes an opposition to Saturn, and also it makes a conjunction to the South Node. And so, Cancer, there is some risk that you are not pushing yourself as much as you should be, and you're perhaps deliberately avoiding things which are unfamiliar, and you might find yourself dwelling on small details fairly irrelevant facts which you shouldn't be, because the world is more complicated for that, and it's more interesting for that. And so there is a danger that you are wasting an opportunity here, and you're focusing on things that are pretty trivial, when there are other more substantive issues that you need to be looking at. And you shouldn't make assumptions, Cancer, that you've sorted everything out, that you've understood everything, that you're now able to understand the way the world works. I mean, it's great to know to understand how the world works. You know everything, and it just makes things so much less complicated. But there are still things out there to discover, and if you think you're ready to make a fixed plan, then you might be wrong. And additionally, there is the challenge of your own unconscious. Your unconscious is telling you something, reminding you of things, and part of you just doesn't want to listen, and you just prefer things to just be simple as possible. And you could get away with it. You could have a very easy, simple day, but then at a later stage you'd realize that actually things weren't quite as straightforward as you thought they were, and you might then have to go back to a drawing board. So perhaps, Cancer, you should embrace change and be ready to look at things that feel just completely unfamiliar. Not just unfamiliar, but also maybe quite challenging. And that could be hard work at first, but I think it's going to make life so much easier for you in the long term. Plus, there's a question of fulfillment. Fulfillment does matter, and the more you know, the more you're aware, the better. And don't forget, next month Jupiter moves into Cancer. That should be a great time for you. I'm not going to talk about it yet, but Jupiter is exalted in Cancer, and of course Cancer is your own sign, and maybe you need to start getting ready for this sign change, which is really very close. When does Jupiter move into Cancer? Jupiter moves into Cancer on, I think it's the 10th of June, so we're just over a month away from that. So maybe you should be starting to think about that. And the more you know, the more you're aware of, then the better for everyone. And one aspect we do have is today is moon trine the sun, and moon trine the sun. It's a great aspect, and it suggests to me that there's nothing you should be afraid of, and you shouldn't be afraid that by taking any particular action you're going to be putting yourself out of balance. That's not true. You're going to be able to handle a lot more than you think you can, and if you come across something new, it's not going to be a real threat. It's going to be something you're going to be able to incorporate. You're going to be able to incorporate everything, and in fact, you'll be not just making things easier for yourself, but you'll be making things more harmonious for yourself, because harmony is about being in touch with everything, in balance with everything. And if you are neglecting one set of experiences or one set of ideas and concepts, then that is going against the laws of nature. So Cancer, it's a simple message. Just be as open-minded as possible. Leo, there are things going on. The sun is making is semi-square the Mars-Uranus midpoint, and in fact the sun is making a load of midpoint aspects, and it's it's not something you're immediately aware of. But let me just show you what I mean here, because I do think that it's important. So here is okay, that's the regular chart. But if we look at the 90-degree dial, and I'll show you what I mean, and it is relevant to you. So here is the sun. There's the sun, which is your ruler, and let's put it on the dial. So you can see that the sun is on the Aries Venus midpoint. There is the Aries and Venus. You see its opposition, the Aries Venus midpoint, and it's on the Mars Uranus midpoint. I mean, Mars Uranus midpoint, that is a big deal, that the sun is on the Mars Uranus midpoint. It is quite tumultuous. Things can just happen there, and the sun is also on the Venus Neptune midpoint. So so the sun on a Venus Neptune midpoint, the sun on a Venus Aries midpoint, sun on a Mars Uranus midpoint. So there is actually a lot going on today, although it might not feel like it at first. And you mustn't assume that everything is going to go to plan. And yes, sun on the Mars Uranus midpoint is about events which you might have created, and they just happen, and you have to look at things again, and you have to look at things again and again. And if you've made careful plans, then Leo, you might well have to rethink them. And those plans could relate to your ambitions. I think you are pretty ambitious at the moment, with Sun moving into Taurus, but with Sun making a sesquiquadrate to the Mars Uranus midpoint, I think that in your desire to make things happen and to really make an impact, there might be some unexpected consequences, and dealing with those unexpected consequences, it could be hard work, and you may prefer that it wasn't all happening in the way it was. It could get complicated, but Leo, you should regard yourself as being a force of stability, especially now with the Sun in Taurus. You can ground things. So even if things don't go to plan, even if there are unexpected events, then I think that you should be able to take everything in your stride. And don't take what people say at face value. People say lots of things, but just because someone says something or promises something doesn't mean it's going to happen. Now, as a Leo, you can actually put a high premium on reliability. And so if someone says they'll do something, well, you accept it. If you hear someone say they feel something or believe something, again, you're likely to take what they say at face value. I don't think at the moment you can take what people say at face value. I think that some people can at the moment be very, very deceptive. And so what you have to do is be real. And you can be real with the Sun in Taurus. Not just the Sun in Taurus, but you've got the Moon in Virgo trine the Sun in Taurus. So with this Moon trine Sun, in Earth signs, things can be really, very grounded. You can ground things, and you can start to, understand the value of things. But, by just perhaps looking at the surface appearances, sometimes, your first conclusions, the easy conclusions, are the ones to go for. And if something looks like something, if you feel that it's obvious, maybe it really is obvious. So be focused. It is a time when you need to be focused, and don't allow yourself to be distracted, and don't listen too hard to what other people are saying, and in particular, don't necessarily trust your feelings, especially when it comes to dealing with other people. You might feel that someone is of a particular mindset, but they may not be of that mindset at all. So it's perhaps a good idea to be ever so slightly suspicious, and that raises a question of to what extent do you completely focus on surface appearances. I think surface appearances could tell you a great deal today, and all the answers may be contained in a surface appearance, but there's always room for going into things a little bit more deeply. And part of that is because there's an opposition between the moon and Saturn. And this moon Saturn opposition, which maybe not be exact until the end of the day or even into tomorrow, it's still starting to weigh in on you, and it does force you to really look at certain situations, maybe certain people with a suspicious view, and asking yourself, what they really want. And if you can understand what someone really wants, what their true motivations are, then it's going to make things a lot easier for you. Virgo, moon is still in your sign, and it's making nice aspects. It's making one nice aspect. It's making a trine to the sun. So, with Moon making a trine to the sun, then Virgo, seems that things are working quite well. There's a certain flow to the day, but don't be complacent. And that complacency is suggested by the fact that the moon is making a conjunction to the south node. And so if you really feel that you know where everything is going, you've just completely sorted everything out, that you can see the full picture, it's all clear to you, and you might be concentrating on the material details, what things look like. If you're starting to feel like that, then maybe you've got something wrong with moon conjunct the south node, and it's your emotions responding to order and going for whatever feels easiest. And the reality is that things may be slightly more complicated from that. The North Node is in Pisces. The North Node is still conjunct Saturn in Pisces, and the Moon is making an opposition to Saturn, and it just may be that the real complication is represented by other people. You can have everything sorted out. Everything is apparently in the right place, but the one thing you haven't taken into account of is other people's particular way of doing things. You may make assumptions that people want something done in a particular way, or that you can make someone happy by doing something, but you can't. You can't make those kind of assumptions. People have a particular way of looking at things at the moment, and you need to understand what that is, because if you do things on your own today, without reference to the outside world, then you could at the very least be wasting your time, and you could be working hard on something which inevitably comes to nothing. And it's because you've been too focused on one thing, and it's unnecessary. And if we look at the moon making this conjunction to the south node, we also have to look at the role of the sun, because the moon is making a trine to the sun. In fact, the sun is well, eventually going to make a sextile to the nodal axis. It's not quite there yet. That's not going to happen for a week. But the Sun is asking you. The Sun in Taurus is asking you to look at things on a broader level. You don't just look at things on a very basic surface level. Have a broad level. Look at things on a broad level. Try to get a wider perspective, and that is the right way of seeing things. That's a right approach. And if you can step back, get some height, then you're going to be able to see the larger picture, and included in that picture will be other people, their likes, their dislikes, and their preferences, and you can start to take that into account, and that is going to make things much easier for you. And that may be what the moon trine sun is all about. Moon trine sun is just asking you to get in touch with something else, something which goes beyond yourself and your immediate interests. And in fact, Virgo, if you make the effort, you're going to be very good with other people. Your ability to understand people, to talk to them, to really engage with who they are is going to be excellent. But you have to make that effort. You have to make the decision that you're going to just go beyond your immediate boundaries and really make an effort to really understand who people are and what they want. So that's the main theme today. I mean, it is certainly a theme. Additionally, the moon is making a square to Jupiter. And we do need to end on a positive note, I think. And that the square between moon and Jupiter is, I think, pretty fortunate. You've got moon in Virgo, square Jupiter in Gemini. There is going to be one more square between moon in Virgo and Jupiter in Gemini. That will be in a month's time. After that, Jupiter will be in Cancer. And so you'll have to wait 11 years before you see another square between moon in Virgo and Jupiter in Gemini. And this moon-Jupiter square, some people find it a problem, but I don't think you find it a problem. And it is about your ambitions and what you want to do, and your ambitions have been important, or at least they should have been important. Jupiter's been in Gemini since May of last year, so it's been in Gemini for about a year, and we've got a month left of it. And so Jupiter in Gemini is about you discovering what you want, what you want to achieve, getting a real feel for your broader ambitions. And there have been times when it's been impossible for you to think about the future, when you haven't known what you wanted, and there have been sort of all sorts of twists and turns, and Jupiter's been retrograde, and that might have been about indecision. But now Jupiter is not retrograde. Jupiter's getting ready to change sign. Moon is making a square to Jupiter, and so in your own way you can start to think about what you want, and you can actually make some of your ambitions real. It won't necessarily be easy, but we do have a T-square at the moment. You've got Moon opposition Saturn, and with Jupiter on the T. So Jupiter represents the answer. It represents the key. And so a lot of these struggles, a lot of your dissatisfaction can be resolved by actually realizing what it is that you want. And now is a time when it should be right in front of you. Okay, you might lose focus once Moon moves out of Virgo and into Libra. Well, don't worry. The Moon will be in Virgo again in a month's time, and it will be square Jupiter in Gemini. But it's just maybe one last opportunity before Jupiter goes into Cancer. So do take your ideas and your ambitions seriously. Don't think that things will just sort themselves out of their own accord. Really decide, Virgo, what you want, and really start to take advantage of the fact that Jupiter is in Gemini, because it's not going to be there forever. Libra, the moon is still in Virgo, and so it's kind of getting ready to move into Libra, your sign, but it's not there yet. And so with the moon in Virgo, you may feel that there are things that you don't necessarily want to do yet, and you also might feel a little bit unprepared. There are things you would like to do, but you're just not ready. And additionally, there could be a little bit of negativity. In fact, it could be quite a lot of negativity. When you look at the possibilities available to you, and not just available to you, maybe even to everyone, things seem to be rather limited, and it may feel that some things are sort of closing in on you. And what is it? Forces that you don't necessarily understand, but things are just slow and heavy, and that really could influence your outlook. And it's important that you don't worry about it too much. You're dealing with collective forces which are going to be affecting everyone, but you're really feeling it at the moment. And the world may not appear to be an especially welcoming place, but I think it's just important that you are able to take it into your stride, and that you don't feel that it's really a complete done deal, that everything has to be difficult, that there's no future. But that just could be the way you feel, passing feelings today. And instead, perhaps rather than worry about the negatives, bear in mind that the moon is making a trine to the sun, and the moon trine sun, it's a fortunate aspect. It's a fortunate aspect for everyone. And this moon trine sun may allow you to get in touch with things that you don't normally get involved with, and it may actually relate to some of your negative feelings. And if you have a negativity about society, for example, and you really go deeply into it, and you're prepared to really think about it, but in a constructive way, that moon trine sun, then you might see some solutions. It might be solutions about how you can help make things better, or it might be about how you can accommodate yourself with a difficult world. And accommodation certainly is possible, but accommodation is also about being aware of how difficult things are. Nothing is going to be entirely easy, and if you accept that, then that means that you're going to have a realistic approach, and also there will be the opportunities for action, and it may be easier once the moon moves into Libra. Tomorrow the moon will be in your sign, so that is going to make things straightforward. Additionally, heliocentrically, we have a square between Venus and Mars, and this Venus-Mars square may say something about relationships. I talked about this Venus-Mars square yesterday, and I have to sort of continue with that theme. That Venus-Mars square is even closer now than it was yesterday, and it just can be about likes and dislikes, and you can't be friends with everyone, and some people just create the wrong impression. And if you feel that you don't like someone for whatever reason, then don't feel guilty about it. not everyone matches your standards, and it may not even be about standards. You can just have an immediate dislike of someone, or it could be something temporary. Someone you know very well, but something about the way they're behaving doesn't fit well with you, and your sense of balance is upset by another person's behavior, and that is just the way it is, and you shouldn't feel that it is the end of the world. Again, you can't be friends with everyone, but additionally, with this Venus square Mars, there may be temporary problems in certain relationships. Certain passing incompatibilities could manifest. Everyone is incompatible with everyone else at some level. There's always a place for incompatibility, and if there is any potential for incompatibility, then that Venus-Mars square could manifest it. Though there is a positive side to that Venus-Mars square. I mean, that Venus-Mars square is not just about repulsion, it's also about attraction, and certain people are attracted to certain other people, and attractiveness is very particular, and if you use that Venus-Mars square in the right way, it may actually boost your own attractiveness, and part of it may be that you give the impression that you're not being open, that you're keeping something to yourself, and that in itself can be attractive. Scorpio, things should be running relatively smoothly, probably 90% of the time. We do have a trine between the moon and the sun, and that moon trine sun can be very sociable. It allows you to get on with lots of different people in an easygoing way, and the moon in Virgo, just being able to relate to different people, not feeling there's any pressure. Then you've got the sun in Taurus. The sun in Taurus is that capacity that you actually have for looking at things from another person's viewpoint. And ideally, with the sun in Taurus, you are prepared to let other people have their say, and it doesn't always have to be you making the decisions. You can let others make the decisions, and in most cases that should be fine. So that moon trine sun does indicate that relationships can actually work very well, and there doesn't seem to be a great deal of pressure. But we do have a quintile aspect between Mars and Uranus. So Mars and Uranus are 72 degrees apart. Mars is, of course, your ruler. And so what does that mean? So that Mars quintile Uranus represents maybe the 10%. I mean, I said that 90% of the day should be fairly straightforward, but there could be parts of the day which are not straightforward at all, where things are complicated, where things are difficult to predict, and the complicating factor may be you yourself. Mars and Uranus are a very willful combination, and so you might want to have an impact in your own way, and even without really thinking about it, you do something that just stirs things up, and once things get stirred up, then things can move quickly. And it could be a situation where you feel that people are being complacent, maybe things are ever so slightly boring, and you just want to create change. And if you want to create change with Mars quintile Uranus, you certainly can, and you can do something out of the blue that changes everything. And this might mean that you can be a troublemaker, or is it a revolutionary? I mean, that's another way of looking at Mars quintile Uranus. Or it may just be about your creative vision, just feeling that things could be better, and being optimistic for the future, but also knowing that you can't conceive of a better future if things stay the same, and you don't want things to stay the same, and that's despite the fact that Scorpio is a fixed sign. Scorpio is supposed to be a fixed sign, is a fixed sign. In general, you like things to be done your way, according to a particular pattern. But right now, this, as far as you're concerned, you're not entirely comfortable with the way things are, and you're wondering, when are things going to be turned upside down? When is the revolution going to happen? And it may actually be down to you, and it's maybe your responsibility to start things moving, to ask the first question, to perhaps do something that no one is expecting. And when you do something that no one is expecting, that really is dramatic, they have to respond to it. There's no option. And when they respond, that creates more change. One response leads to another response, and before you know it, you've got a full-scale revolution. And of course, this revolution is not going to be about the overthrow of an entire country. It may be a revolution in your own mind, but at the very least, you don't have to have other people around you to have a revolution. It can be a personal revolution, or it can be a revolution relating to a few people, your household, or where you're working. Wherever you feel the revolution is needed with this Mars quintile Uranus, I think you can actually start that revolution. You'll then have to deal with the consequences, but you can worry about that later. Sagittarius, you can't do everything on your own, I don't think. Part of you would like to, but Jupiter has been moving through Gemini for the last year. Jupiter went into Gemini, I think, in May of last year, and Jupiter stays in Gemini for just over a month because it moves into Cancer. Next month, around June the 10th? Is it June the 10th, around then, when Jupiter moves into Cancer? Yeah, Jupiter moves into Cancer around then. So things will change, but at the moment, Jupiter's in Gemini. Jupiter's your ruler, and you can't do everything on your own. At least you shouldn't try. You shouldn't try too hard to do everything on your own. And help is always available. And if you think you can do everything on your own, then things can go wrong. Now, things could go wrong because you're taking on too much and you just can't do it. You in the end need help. Or things can go wrong because you haven't taken into account what other people want. And today we have a square aspect between the Moon and Jupiter, and that moon in Virgo square Jupiter in Gemini, really indicates that there are things you want. There are definitely things you want to achieve. You want to make an impact, and you're very keen to move forward. But just moving forward on your own, may be difficult. You may in the end run out of steam, or you might find that there's opposition because you haven't taken another person or a group of people into consideration. And so that might be the challenge with this Moon square Jupiter. Now, I know that Moon square Jupiter is a very common aspect, but it becomes more important now. It becomes more pressing because there's only just over a month left of Jupiter being in Gemini. Every hard aspect, any aspect, indeed any aspect involving Jupiter should be taken seriously now, because it's an opportunity, and so or even a final opportunity. So really think about this, and think about how you're going about things, and whether you're not making enough of an effort to incorporate other people and other ideas into your plans, whateber they might be. But the moon in Virgo doesn't just make a square to Jupiter, it does make a trine to the sun. I think that moon trine sun is, it's a great aspect, and it allows you to really get yourself together. And it's about togetherness on many levels. Getting yourself together, sure, it requires you to involve other people very often in whatever your plans are, but there's also a basic organizational side to moon trine sun. And if you feel you want to organize things and prepare, then I think you're going to be able to do it very well, and it will be appreciated. So that might be another reason why you need to talk to people, tell people what you're doing, and tell people what you're planning, because I think if you give people the chance, they're going to be very supportive. Now, what I'm saying seems to have most connection with career and work, but it's not just about that. It's about whatever you feel is important to you, wherever you feel you need to be going. That's something that you can really start to think about, and you can really make good progress today. But don't be too single-minded. That's important. Ambition for the sake of ambition is not going to get anywhere. You have to take other things into account. You have to take other people into account. You may have to take your family into account. You may have to also consider, what it means to be secure. And that is a theme that I've been talking about on and off when describing Sagittarius over the last few months. What it means to be secure. You don't want to destroy the ground on which you're standing. That's absolutely not what you want to happen. And what happens in your home, that is also to be considered. So single-minded, or rather mindless ambition is something that should be avoided, because in the end it will run out of steam. But if you take into account everything, if you can bring everything together, and as a Sagittarius, this is something you should be able to do. That's what Sagittarius is all about as a sign. It is about bringing all your many skills, your character, your resources. It's about bringing it all together and focusing on the target and hitting the target. After all, Sagittarius is the archer, and so that's what you can do. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but it's something you are definitely supposed to be doing. So Sagittarius, you should probably just go ahead and do it. Capricorn, you are enjoying the moon moving through Virgo. I think it's a nice place for the moon to be, especially if you're a Capricorn, and the moon's in an Earth sign. It's making a trine to the sun, and it's also really effectively the moon is making a trine to Capricorn, which is your own sign, and the sun is making a trine to Capricorn. So there's a sort of grand trine energy here with moon in Virgo, sun in Taurus, and of course Capricorn is the missing sign. So today, I think that most things are just going to go your way. So, what do you want to do today? What would you like to happen? And it can happen. It's not really a time for having doubts. And, additionally, you really have, a great deal of energy at the moment. You might not think you've got much energy, but once you really try to, apply yourself, you're going to start to see real movement. So, there's no real place for doubt at the moment. And, you need to sort of get over any lingering Capricorn pessimism or over-realism. We don't need that. And so, be be as happy and positive as possible. And so it's a really continuation of yesterday, but arguably even better. So I don't know what kind of day you had yesterday. I'm hoping you had a good day yesterday. If you had a not so good day yesterday, I mean, when I say yesterday, I'm talking about Tuesday. If Tuesday wasn't so great, then I'm sorry about that. I mean, I thought Tuesday would be okay, but today, Wednesday, really should be good. So, don't feel that anything is impossible, and your general approach, is going to really also, make you popular. People are going to like what you're doing, and they're going to be interested in what you're doing. And it is a time when there can be plenty of cooperation, if you need cooperation, and also insights. Because you're a down-to-earth Capricorn, that you don't know everything. And Capricorn is not especially known to be an arrogant sign. And so because of a certain amount of humility, you're prepared to listen to what other people are saying and what other people are suggesting. Doesn't mean you have to take them at face value, but you can take advantage of what you hear and the advice you're getting. And so you hear something, you hear some great ideas, and you don't actually necessarily take them at face value, and then you bring them down to earth. You might take something that on the face of it is completely unrealistic and crazy, but you bring it down to earth. If you like, you work on it, maybe in your conceptual workshop, and you pull out the things which really are crazy and unrealistic, but you can then create things that really work. And most things can work, and this is really helped by what I think is really quite a positive attitude that you are generating. So Capricorn, I think today can be a great day. It's a 5-star day, and of all the 12 signs, I think all things being equal, Capricorn has the best prospects for today. Aquarius, don't take yourself too seriously. I think there's a danger that you might think that everything is serious, that if you let your guard down, things could go wrong, and everything might have to be carefully analyzed, at least in the first instance. So whatever happens, you feel you have to think about it. And to begin with, I don't think you're going to be especially trusting. And this approach, I know it makes sense. We always have to be careful. But I think you can be too careful, and you can over-interpret things. So you take the view that you can't look at anything at face value. You've got to, carefully analyze it, and you must be always looking for hidden motivations. And such an approach may sometimes work, but I don't think it's going to particularly work at the moment. I think that you're just going to be overcomplicating things, and you may actually be spoiling your luck by thinking too much. And it may be that actually, Aquarius, things are very simple. You just take things as they are, and that's it. And you can sometimes trust your first impressions. And so if you can do that, then everything else should start to work out for you. I mean, I think actually it looks like being quite a good day. I think that you actually have a fair amount of energy. You're quite determined, and if you decide you want something, you can give it your best shot. And additionally, once you can get over your negativity, because there is a little bit of negativity at the moment, and it's because you're making things too complicated. But once you can get over that, then you can start to see things in a different way. And I think that you should be making an effort at the moment, to try to be positive, not looking so much for the problems, but for seeing the opportunities. And if you do come across a difficult situation, something that really seems to be impossible, there's a very good chance that you can resolve it through a constructive approach and being able to think through to the end result. And that actually, if you give yourself the best chance, there are a few things that you can't achieve. So in many respects, today is a lot about attitude. The wrong attitude, too much negativity could absolutely wreck the day. But fundamentally, you can be dynamic, and you may be able to benefit from other people's dynamism. Other people are there for you. I know that recently some people have been a problem, but perhaps people who used to be a problem can actually show that they have got another side to their personality, that they can actually be useful. And so, don't think that you are on your own, that it's you against the rest of the world, because it's not. And we've got a trine between the moon and the sun, and that moon trine sun, it's a fortunate aspect. Moon in Virgo, trine sun in Taurus, and that trine should be giving you some confidence. At the moment, Aquarius, you really feel a need to be centered, and perhaps that's part of the reason why you're a little bit negative, is because you might regard everything as a threat to your centering, as a threat to your security. So you don't want to trust it. But with the moon trine the sun, that gives you an opportunity to see things in a different way. And if you give other people a chance, then I do think in the end that you will be pleasantly surprised. So, it's a simple message, Aquarius. Just have a constructive attitude, and in that way you can enjoy the day. Pisces. Pisces, you still regard people as having an influence. Whether that's a good or a bad influence kind of depends on the situation, but you kind of feel that you have to take into consideration what other people are doing or not doing. But you can take things too far. The moon is in Virgo, it's in your opposite sign, but it is conjunct the South Node. So if you spend too much time worrying about other people and what other people want, then you could find yourself going in the wrong direction, and you could just be sort of asking too many questions. And essentially, it should be about you and what's important to you. If it's important to you, it's probably important to everyone else as well. So maybe it's a time when you actually have to start being a little bit selfish and start to think about what matters to you. And there are going to be moments of disagreement. It might be unspoken disagreement, but you might feel that you're being pushed in a direction or pulled in a direction that you don't really want to go into. And it's tempting to give in and to do what another person wants, or to do even what society wants of you. It's tempting. But if you're honest with yourself, that's not the right thing to be doing. You need to be thinking about yourself, and you need to be thinking about what you are trying to build for yourself. And if you do things other people's way, then I don't think you're going to be happy. Okay, you might say that there's a possibility of compromise, that you can be happy and other people can be happy. Well, that is possible. But the question is, what makes you feel comfortable? And your comfort does matter today. And if you're feeling comfortable, well, that's fine. But if you start to feel ever so slightly uncomfortable, then that is a sign that you're being pulled in the wrong direction. So Pisces, that is a theme for today. Looking after yourself and perhaps even jealously guarding your own interests. It's okay. You don't have to feel bad about that. And additionally, if you are on another person's territory, you're not able to be yourself, and you're not able to do what you're good at. And that's what you need to be thinking about. There are things you can do well, but you can only do them well in certain situations. So you need to make sure that you put yourself in a situation, where you can maximize your many and various talents and skills. And that's it. Those are my forecasts for 12 signs. And now I want to look at the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Wednesday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram 63, which is after completion. It is the penultimate hexagram in the I Ching, because there are 64 hexagrams. 64 is before completion and 63 is after completion. And 63 as a hexagram, it suggests that something is finished. You could see it like crossing the river. We have crossed the river, and that seems great. It's always good when we've completed the journey. But very often, once the journey is completed, once the transition has been made, that's when the problems start. It might be because we're in a new situation and we don't understand the rules, and we make assumptions, and then things start to go wrong very quickly. And this is what the I Ching says with 63. It starts off well, but can end up in a rather chaotic position. And so you could actually see this, if you want to use a military analogy of 63, as a bridgehead. I don't know, we've just had the anniversary of sort of a D-Day landings. Was it the 81st anniversary? We're about to have the 81st anniversary of a D-Day landing. So you send all your troops across the English Channel, and you find a beach and you find your beachhead, but then you've got to break out of a beachhead, and that might be the situation we're in. How are we going to break out of a bridgehead? Because on the bridgehead, we may be extremely vulnerable to attack. We need to be supplied, and that's where the chaos might lie. And the advice here about what do we do is represented by the top line, because we do have the top line moving, and the advice is kind of varied depending on which version of the I Ching you look at. One view is that you're fine, provided you don't turn back. If you turn back, you will end up like Lot's wife. And she looked back after escaping from Sodom and Gomorrah, isn't that right? She looked back and she turned into a pillar of salt. We don't want to turn into a pillar of salt. And so keep going. Movement is really important, and don't be complacent. Don't think that you've made it across the river, across the English Channel, whatever you're trying to cross. That's where the problems start, and you've got to keep going. And additionally, you shouldn't worry about the past, regret the past. If you tie yourself to the past, then you're in trouble. An alternative interpretation would be to say that one has simply gone too far. So after completion, we've carried on and we've got into deeper water, and we've arrived at a situation where we can no longer cope. So that is an alternative view. I'm not quite sure how well it fits in, with this idea of, whether we have gone too far or whether we have gone not far enough. Because one view of this hexagram is that we shouldn't stay still. If we stay still, then we're in trouble. So perhaps if we go back to this idea of being in deep water, we need to get through this deep water. We shouldn't hang around and realize, hold on, we're in deep water. I'm out of my depth. That's maybe when the trouble starts. Maybe we need to get over this deep part of a river, get through it, and continue to the other side. But there are still dangers. The I Ching does talk about water going over one's head. That's always a bad sign when I Ching starts talking about when water over your head, because that's quite deadly. In the another hexagram 28, the last line of that, which is preponderance of the great, but it talks about water going over your head as a symbolism of death, but saying, well, don't worry, there are more important things than life. But I don't think this hexagram is about death. It's just more about a dangerous situation. We think we've got through something. We think we've got to the other side. We think something is done, but it's not done. And we have to be careful. But we don't want to be so cautious that we stay still, because if we stand still, we are very vulnerable, especially if we're in the middle of a river and we are out of our depth. Now, top line moves. That means that we move to a separate hexagram, and the hexagram we move to is hexagram number 37, which is the family. And this is quite a gentle hexagram in comparison. And so perhaps having made this transition, having made a big change in our life, we need to be finding stability as fast as possible. Yeah, the situation has changed. We're not going back to the past, but at the same time, we do need certain constants. And one of those constants is the family. Now, the family can be about literally the family. It can be about a group of people who we feel comfortable with, whether it's our friends, at work, it could be our family, but just finding the reassurance of other people who we trust. We'll look after them, they'll look after us, where there is additionally a stable hierarchy. I know we're not supposed to think about hierarchies in the modern world, but being part of that stable hierarchy, or rejoining a stable hierarchy, is something useful after we've had this big trauma of crossing a river, moving from one place to another. So that's perhaps what we need to be doing. We've created a dislocation. We had to create that dislocation. We had to make that change. We can't go back. But at the same time, having got to the other side of a river, we need a new set of stable relationships, and we need to become part of something. And the sooner we can become part of something, the better for everyone. And now I want to look at the quintile between Mars and Uranus, which happens today. And I think this quintile could be quite important. And so let me show you the actual aspect of Mars quintile Uranus. So here it is. So this is the moment the Mars quintile Uranus is exact. It's today, London time. That's at 5 to 4 in the afternoon. So it will be in the morning if you're in the Americas. probably early tomorrow morning if you're in Australia or New Zealand. So there's the quintile. So there you can see Mars is at 842 Leo and Uranus is at 2642 Taurus. So they are exactly 72 degrees apart. And probably the reason, one of the reasons at least, why people don't look at quintiles is because they're difficult to spot. It's not like an opposition where you could just see it just like that, just two signs in opposite degrees. 5 degrees Taurus plays 5 degrees Scorpio. That's easy to spot. Quintiles are not easy to spot, so maybe that's why they get neglected. So 72 degrees is 1/5 of the circle. And so there is a great fiveness to the quintile. And I can illustrate this fiveness because if we take the absolute longitude of Mars and we take the absolute longitude of Uranus, so if we convert Mars to its absolute longitude, that is 128 degrees 42, and Uranus's absolute longitude is 56 degrees 42. You see, if that doesn't make sense, you think Aries is 30 degrees, Taurus is another 30 degrees, and Gemini is another 30 degrees. So the first four signs, Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, 30 degrees, so that's 120. And then 842 for Leo, so that gives you to 128 degrees 42 Leo. Likewise, Uranus is at 2642, so we've got the 30 degrees of Leo, and then we add, the 30 degrees of Aries, and so the absolute longitude of Uranus will be 56 degrees 42. So if we take the absolute longitudes of Mars and Uranus, we multiply those by 5, and if our answers are greater than 360, we subtract 360 until we got back to an absolute longitude of under 360, and then we just convert to the signs. So if we create a fifth harmonic chart, and which means multiplying everything by 5, and just to show you what the fifth harmonic of today looks like, we will find the fifth harmonic, but we've got, obviously, Mars and Uranus are exactly square one another. So that's what it's about. So it is about fiveness. I won't confuse you by staying with the fifth harmonic. So there's a regular chart. So fiveness can be about the will, what we are trying to create. And we might have an idea about how we'd like things to happen, how we'd like things to turn out. So with Mars quintile Uranus, we are potentially trying to create drama. We are trying to create a dramatic event, and it's a very human aspect. So as humans, we want to have an impact. We have a willpower, and can we use this willpower? And maybe we can. And with Mars Uranus, this is the effect that we want. And yeah, it can be with Mars Uranus a very violent effect, and it can force people to stop what they're doing. This is going to have a lasting impact. And so this would suggest that if you're looking at a Mars Uranus event, you wouldn't so much be looking at an earthquake. I mean, an earthquake is not Mars quintile Uranus. Maybe Mars conjunct Uranus, but not Mars quintile Uranus, because an earthquake is a natural phenomena. Quintiles are not about natural phenomena, at least in my understanding of it. They are about phenomena deliberately created by human beings. So that's perhaps what we should be looking at with Mars quintile Uranus. And what makes this Mars quintile Uranus so spectacular is the fact that the sun is on the Mars Uranus midpoint. So there's the Mars Uranus midpoint. So it will be at around 4, is that right? 2 degrees. We'll be at 2 degrees 40, 2 degrees 42 2 degrees 42 Cancer, and so the Sun is making a semi-square to the Mars-Uranus midpoint. So the Sun on the Mars-Uranus midpoint, and we're dealing with two aspects that are in quintile anyway. So let me just show you that on the 90-degree dial. So if we put the Sun on the 90-degree dial, there is Mars, there is Uranus. It is very close to the Mars-Uranus midpoint. The Sun is also making other aspects, midpoint aspects. It's on the Venus Aries midpoint. It's on the Venus Neptune midpoint. It's actually on almost on the Venus Saturn midpoint. Yeah, it's on the Venus Saturn midpoint. So the Sun is doing a lot by midpoints, because this is a point about today. On the surface today, not a great deal is happening, but when you actually drill down, there really are things going on. And so people could be trying their hardest to have an influence and to make things happen. So what I thought I'd do now is I would look at examples of events taking place either when there was a Mars quintile Uranus or a Mars biquintile Uranus. So biquintile is 144 degrees, which is 2/5 of a circle. So theoretically, a quintile and a biquintile should work in exactly the same way. So let's start off with the chart of the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, December the 25th, 1979. So this was clearly something that was designed by human beings. The Soviet Union was not happy with the way things were going in Afghanistan, so it decided to send its troops in. I think it sent in special forces into Kabul. I think they might have executed the president, and then after that they sent in the army. And to begin with, it was a very successful intervention. It only went wrong after of course, America started to arm the Taliban, and of course that created Al Qaeda and the Twin Towers. A lot of the Islamic terrorism we have now is arguably started with America's response to the Soviet intervention, or the Soviet invasion. But that seems to me to be a Mars quintile Uranus event, and so there's Mars in Virgo, and fairly close to a 72-degree aspect with Mars with Uranus. So that is an extreme example of someone doing something dramatic. And another recent example was in South Korea in December. So in December, the president decided to declare martial law. And of course, it didn't last long. But the president, again, he was not happy with the situation in South Korea, and he decided that he was going to change things. Mars quintile Uranus. So there's Mars, there's Uranus, pretty close to a 72-degree aspect, and so that can be another event. But again, you can see that it happened because of human machinations. This is not an earthquake. Or we had actually in December of 2024, we had a Mars quintile Uranus, and there was a lot of stuff going on at that time. So another thing going on around this time, on December the 8th, where Mars was still quintile Uranus, because Mars was going very slowly at this time, and the fall of Damascus. So this is when the rebels, supported by Syrian rebels, supported by Turkey, probably supported by the US as well, they expanded their field of operation, and they took out Damascus. And so again, with the Soviet intervention in Afghanistan. This was another intervention, again, very contrived, humans planning it, and this is the approximate time in which Damascus fell. And what else was going on in December? Another thing that happened in December was the killing of Brian Thompson, the CEO of United Healthcare. We don't know who killed Brian Thompson. Someone has been accused of his killing, and at the time of that killing, there was that Mars quintile Uranus. So this was Mars quintile Uranus. It could be about someone having a particular idea about what they wanted to happen, someone not being happy with the way things are and feeling they want to create change, creating an act, so a planned act. And that's Mars quintile Uranus, and it's a very Mars quintile Uranus event, someone being assassinated, and someone who is symbolic of the healthcare system in the US. Okay. Mars quintile Uranus. And other assassinations, the assassination of Mahatma Gandhi took place with Mars quintile Uranus. This is something that was very planned. This was a very close Mars quintile Uranus, within 3-degree orb. I think it obviously it was planned. I don't know a great deal about it. I think that the assassins were sort of Indian nationalists, and they felt that Mahatma Gandhi, I believe, had let them down. I think by listening too much to Muslims. I think that was what it was about, and they felt that they felt they needed to do it. And so Mars quintile Uranus, you can see that you have an assassination. It's not like Gandhi being struck by thunder or some natural event. It is something very deliberate, something that has been definitely planned. And so there is sort of a negativity here. I mean, some things that are explosive, people dying, and if we look at the biquintiles, we can see other planned events. And so the attack on the American, was it consulate or was it embassy? I think it was a consulate in Benghazi on September the 11th, 2012. Again, a planned attack on an American building, and it in which the ambassador, was it the ambassador? The sort of senior American diplomat was killed, and there is Mars not quintile Uranus, but Mars was biquintile Uranus. Sorry, I should know more about the details of the Benghazi attack, but I think you know the event I'm talking about on September the 11th, 2012. Kind of interesting coincidence that it's on September the 11th. So that's Libya, and it's not just Islamic terrorists who have attacks. Governments can do it. France can do it. The Rainbow Warrior. So the Rainbow Warrior was this ship owned by Greenpeace, and in 1985 they were monitoring a French nuclear test, which and they were trying, well, not just monitoring, I think they were trying to interfere with it by sailing in the test zone. And the French didn't like it, and so the French planned an attack on the Rainbow Warrior. They sent a couple of agents to New Zealand, and this happened in Auckland, and the agents, they planted a bomb on the Rainbow Warrior, and it blew up, and the Rainbow Warrior sunk, and there was a photographer on board who was killed in the explosion or drowned. I'm not quite sure what happened to him. And yeah, this happened when Mars was biquintile Uranus. So there's Mars, 144 degrees from Uranus. So that does give us an idea about the kind of things we might be expecting with this Mars quintile Uranus. There are a couple of events which are not violent. You might have Margaret Thatcher becoming leader of the Conservative Party. So when she became leader of the Conservative Party, when there was a Mars quintile, Mars was quintile Uranus. So she was someone who deliberately wanted to overturn things. Mars Uranus, she was not just prepared to just go with the established way of doing things. She was a rebel in her own way, and she wanted to upset the consensus that had been in existence in the 60s and the 70s in Britain. And so that may say something about her leadership. And so, that gives you an idea about Mars Uranus. And I do think it is potentially a dangerous aspect. People wanting to change things, and people wanting to change things, very often through violence, and they're trying to make a point. And a few people who finishing off with a couple of individual people who have had Mars Uranus aspects in their chart. So there was this is Daniel Pearl. He was the American journalist who went to Pakistan and got kidnapped and murdered. He was interested in what was going on with Islamic terrorism, and he decided to he was kidnapped, and he had Mars Uranus he had a Mars Uranus quintile in his horoscope, and so his Mars Uranus quintile was not exact, but this may say something about the kind of events that he was attracted to. Maybe he deliberately went for danger. That again is deliberate, something deliberate about it. And so he went to meet some people in Pakistan, and he was kidnapped, and that was the end of him. It was a dangerous thing to do, and maybe if you've got Mars quintile Jupiter, Mars quintile Uranus, you can be encouraged to do things which are particularly dangerous. And then we had this man, Demian Hanul. Demian Hanul was someone involved with the Ukrainian nationalists, and he had a very active Facebook account, and he would talk about how he couldn't stand Russia, and he would talk about all his activities, and I think he was involved in the forced mobilization, and so he was sort of running around Odessa doing whatever he liked, and then he got shot. And so here this is Demian Hanul I think was involved in the fire in Odessa in the beginning of May 2014, where a lot of ethnic Russians were killed in a trade union building. So he was very much involved with Ukrainian nationalism. He was quite into having a pretty violent approach to life, and so that's Mars quintile Uranus in his chart. So Mars, we don't have a time of birth for him. So Mars quintile Uranus may say something something about someone who really courts violence, but almost in a quite deliberate way. And he has a violent way of looking at the world. It's almost a bit contrived. So that's how a Mars quintile Uranus could work. And interesting, Ursula von der Leyen, of European Union fame, she has Mars quintile Uranus, so she is seems very excited about the war in Ukraine, getting Europe as involved as possible with Ukraine's war against Russia, wanting total commitment from Europe. And so the idea of violence, guns, weaponry. I think she was minister. I think she was Minister of Defence in Germany. I don't think she was a very good Minister of Defence. I think I'm right, but so it all seems to excite her, and she's quite. It's all very contrived, and she wants to send as much weaponry as possible. So that's a way in which Mars quintile Uranus could work. Finally, two people who have Mars quintile Uranus, Mars biquintile Uranus. One of them is Dominic Cummings. You probably have heard of him if you're in the UK. He was one of the brains behind Brexit. He is sort of an intellectual on the right of British politics, and he has the idea that everything needs to be completely changed. You know, the blob represents, you know, constant government, the civil service, and I think he talks about the blob, and he wants to overthrow everything. And Dominic Cummings, at least not everything, but he wants dramatic change to British society, because as far as he's concerned, that's the only way things can move forward. And Dominic Cummings has Mars biquintile Uranus. Don't have a time of birth for him, but it looks as if it's a pretty close biquintile Uranus. So he is deliberately trying to create change, not through violence, but through his intellect and presumably through his networking and his general political skills. And finally, there is Michelle Obama. And Michelle Obama has a biquintile between Mars and Uranus, not an exact Mars quintile not an exact aspect, but it may be that at some level she tries to create drama. She wants to be noticed, and she perhaps wants to be a little bit hostile, and that may be reflected in some of her recent interviews. And of course, it's Mars, so that may say something about her husband, Barack Obama. So that could be how it works. You probably know more about Michelle Obama than me, but from what I do know of her, it may be that Mars biquintile Uranus is working. So those are a few thoughts about the Mars quintile and biquintile Uranus. And today, Wednesday, May the 7th, we do have a Mars quintile Uranus, and I think that could actually be an important aspect, especially because the Sun is making a semi-square to the Mars-Uranus midpoint. Anyway, that's it. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, do feel free to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.